In what order would you place the worst generation pirates from One Piece? Who do you think's the weakest? Who do you think's the strongest? There are 12 members in what is also known as the Supernovas. Now, these 12 members are considered the up-and-coming pirates, the pirates of the new era. They're not all super young, but the most recent pirates that have been causing lots of chaos. During the Sabaody Archipelago, these are the pirates, not including Blackbeard, who had 100 million berry bounties and higher. So we know in the scope of normal One Piece civilians, these are all incredibly strong pirates. But where do they rank in terms of the grand scale of the One Piece world? Where do they rank in terms of their own with their own feats, with their own powers, in their own group? What order would we place them in? That is what we're going to discuss tonight. Now, I think this list might be a little bit controversial. It's very subjective. A lot of these characters, while we have feats for, they're a little bit nebulous when it comes to certain characters that, that might be one tier above, one tier below. We've got lots of characters where it took me a real, a real go at, looking at them being like, oh, I think this character's better. No, I have to move that. There was some real tricky placements here, so I'm very curious to see what your thoughts on it are. Please leave your rankings down below in the comments and let me know where you think I might have gone wrong. Let me know if you think, oh no, play number 7 should have been in the 4th spot, etc, etc. But without further ado, let's get into tonight's video, and we're going to go from 12th place, and that is Capone Gang Beiji. Now, this is a character that pains me a little bit to put in dead last, because he's got quite a lot of personality. He has more personality and more charisma than 11th, 10th, and 9th, I reckon. But in terms of just his power, a very unique devil fruit. He's Paramecia Castle fruit, allowing him to store not just objects but also people inside of his body, and he can then shoot them out. A very good supportive ability and also a very good defensive ability, being able to transform himself into his fortress. So he's certainly got strength. He helped the Straw Hats confront Big Mom, so he's not lacking in bravery either, compared to maybe the next entrance on this list, spoiler alert. But unfortunately, we just don't see any feats from him that truly warrant any position higher. A lot of that has to do with, once we get into the 1-0 arc, we start getting into characters that have a lot more... they're fighting a lot stronger characters, and the fights are more back and forth. Beiji doesn't really have a fight to himself. He's kind of just helping out the Straw Hats. We see that he takes down Peckham's quite easily. Took him unaware, though, and at the end of the day, compared to who the people further up on this list fight, Peckham's isn't the best kind of gauge for, how strong the worst generation is. So he has to come in dead last, unfortunately. You might be thinking, Jack, that's really surprising. I thought Arouge would be the 12th place, since he's the one we see the least of. But ironically, I actually have him quite up a bit higher. So stay tuned to see where I put Arouge from the worst generation. In 11th space, though. 11th place? Space? Can't even get my own words right tonight. In 11th place, we have the Roar of the Sea, Scratchman Apu. Now, this is probably my least favorite member out of the worst generation, out of the Supernova. His feats are very kind of hit and miss. His greatest feat by far is kind of, I don't want to say knocking out, but making Luffy's eyes go into the back of his head, and not like that, you sick perverts, even though I imagine that's out there somewhere on the internet. But he knocks out Luffy temporarily for like 0.001 seconds and pushes back Zoro through his Devil Fruit ability, being able to turn his body into instruments and have those instruments cause different causes and effects. A very versatile power, and it serves him quite well in being more of a cowardly character, very quick to change sides, very much eager to use everyone around him to get himself to higher and higher positions in the new world. So a bit of a snake, a bit of a cockroach. He is at least in the fight with CP0, with Drake, but we don't really see him doing much there. We see that the numbers follow him, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's just because of his strength. The numbers are a little bit more, let's say, simple, if you will. He is able to blow up Kizaru in Sub-Odi Archipelago before the time skip, which is very cool. Once again, though, Kizaru is just standing there and kind of letting himself get blown up because he's a Logia. So it doesn't go much to a feat for Apu. So I need to... He's very much kind of like Beiji in... Their feats aren't too impressive. In fact, number 10 and 9... These four, no, not four, that's wrong. Beiji was always going to come in last. 11, 10, and 9, these are the three I switched up the most. And I'd be very curious to see how you guys would place these three characters. Because in 10th place, I have, you see, I got it right there. In 10th place, we have Hawkins, the magician or the sorcerer. Now, this is one of the Supernovas that I was the most interested in. Very, a lot of duality there with Apu, where I'm like, I'm not really liking what you're bringing to the screen. But Hawkins had a really sick design, a really good power being able to transfer damage to other targets, which we'll get into a little bit more when we kind of discuss some of the other abilities of his straw fruit. But it's the feats that just don't serve him very well. He probably performed one of the best against Kizaru. He stayed around the longest. Once again, though, it's not much of a feat. He doesn't do any sort of damage to Kizaru, like we would expect for a pirate at his level at that time in the story. He gets subservient to Kaido, doesn't believe he has a chance of being able to fight him remotely, which is fair enough as well. He fights Luffy and Zoro, and Apu probably does better in the sense of getting more damage in on them. But Hawkins shows more versatility in their fight. He's able to chase Zoro and Luffy off. Not that they couldn't have just turned around and beat his ass, but it needs to be mentioned. He then fought Killer, and this is the reason why I am putting him higher than Apu. Even though Killer was very much compromised in the fight because Hawkins had made Killer's captain, a hostage, it still goes to show that he was able to contend with him somewhat. He was intelligent enough to use his power to take a hostage of someone Killer cared about. And I think that level of thought and strategy just should place him higher up than Apu. In terms of his devil fruit power, we know that he's able to put voodoo dolls in other people's bodies, so when he takes damage, he can then transfer it to who's ever holding his cursed voodoo dolls. He can also create straw men that are able to summon nails as well, so it's not just the straw fruit, it's the straw fruit and the nail fruit, but I digress. His tarot cards aren't part of his devil fruit power. He can just predict the future through the tarot cards, which aids him in his strategy. Another reason, like I was saying, why I would put him over Apu. But in my mind, he comes in 10th place. I do think he could bump out who we have as 9th, but we'll get into that as we discuss 9th place. 9th place, you probably guessed it with how I was talking about them all, and if you've watched this story, it is the Sword member Drake. Now, the only member on this list that is not a pirate, but is a marine. Now, this is a man that has zero personality, unfortunately. He's a very, very plain vanilla character that just doesn't have much intrigue behind him. He has a cool concept with how he's a double agent, but his personality is so bland that even Apu is probably more of an interesting character, which is saying a lot. I've never really seen much fanfare for Drake. He often just gets taken out very quickly. His ancient Zoan the Allosaurus fruit is cool in theory, but seems very, very fragile. We know that he's a Toby Ropo, so he's placed higher than Hawkins in that regard. But the reason, not just because of that, but the reason he's higher than Hawkins is because his feat of facing, I forget his name, but the CP0 agent in Wano. Now, this is a fight that he's able to at the end of it, stab the CP0 agent, but he does it from behind, which I'm not counting as a feat. But as they're going back and forth, the CP0 agent is at least getting bruises and scratches and comments on Drake's strength. And fighting the CP0 agent to even somewhat of a standstill, I think, is a better feat than Hawkins had, that Apu had, and that Capone Gangbeiji had. So I think he has to come in higher than all of them, even though it pains me a little bit just with his character kind of not being as, multi-dimensional as some of the other members of the Supernova. Once again, a very cool power. I would have loved to have seen it have, have some cool feats where he could have picked up some W's against even some weaker opponents. But other than no-named riffraff, he just doesn't take out anyone of note, so he certainly can't be higher than 9th place. But we've got 8th place now, and this is where I'm actually going to put a Rouge. And you might be thinking, Jesus, Jack, you haven't put him in 12th, you haven't put him in 11th, 10th, or 9th, but in 8th. We haven't seen this man in 300, 400 chapters or something like that. Something crazy. Why on earth would you put him higher than Drake, Hawkins, and Apu? The reason being is because we know that he defeats Snack. Now, this is a very nebulous feat. I could understand if you don't like him placed this high, but from what we at least know, Snack was a Yonko commander. We know that sort of tier of strength. He obviously isn't as powerful as the top 3 in Big Mom's crew, meaning Katakuri, Cracker, and Smoothie. But he is still listed as a commander. He's not listed as just one of the, one of Big Mom's sons. So the way I see it, he's kind of like, you see, most Yonko only have 3 kind of like generals, if you want to call them that. But I do reckon the fact that he is called a commander means that he should be at least kind of at that, the Whitebeard commanders showed maybe the least out of all of them, but maybe around that Vista level of strength. But I do, I don't want to talk over myself and just keep repeating myself. The fact that he beat him, I reckon, is a better feat than Drake fighting the CP0 agent. If Drake beat the CP0 agent, maybe we would put Drake above Rouge. But the fact that Drake couldn't secure the W, but Rouge could, keep in mind he got injured doing this, I think that he does need to be placed this high. Taking out a Yonko commander, even if we don't know anything at all about him, I think on paper is a better feat than, going toe-to-toe but otherwise getting overwhelmed by a CP0 agent. But hey, that's just my opinion. Let me know what you think down in the comments below. But I reckon this is the point that marks us going into the real heavy hitters of the Supernova. If we were doing this in a tier list, I think this first 4 members, is it 4? I'm just looking at my list that I've got over here. Not 4, 5 members. Jack, can you please count? These 5 members, I think, are in the lowest tier out of the Supernovas. Then I think it goes the second tier, which encompasses our 7th spot to our maybe even just 7 and 6 spot, maybe 5th if you want to go there. And then you start getting into just the really, really heavy hitters, which you all know who they are. The placement might surprise you, but I think you know who will be more at the top of this list. In 7th place, we have Killer, Captain Eustace Kidd's right-hand man. Now, this is someone who it was really difficult to rank. With 7th and 6th spot, it was very much a throw-up. And a throw-up? It was, I guess that word works, but it sounded really weird to my ears. I'm going to go out and just tell you who the 6th spot is, because we need to compare them to why I've put them in this order. In 6th spot, we have Jewelry Bonnie. Now, these two were really difficult to rank, because Killer's best feat by far is being able to injure Kaido through his sonic scythe blades and dealing internal damage to Kaido. Jewelry Bonnie, though, is able to use her Age Devil Fruit powers, her Paramecia Devil Fruit powers, to envision different alternate timelines of herself and acquire that strength, literally turning her into a sun god variant slash mode, which is crazy to think of. She can also one-shot you by touching you and turning you into an old man or a child. While that technique wouldn't work on people like Kaido because of the sheer amount of Conqueror's Haki, I do think that she would be able to use that on Killer. So that's why I've placed her above Killer. Once again though, Killer was able to fight up on the rooftop with two Emperors. We haven't seen Bonnie be able to do that. Where you would Saint Gaia Saturn, where you would put him in the pecking order of a Yonko is kind of up in the air. I do think the Yonkos are stronger than Saturn. So Killer being able to contend with them is probably more of an impressive feat. And I would say overall that this might be the first time where we kind of take a lot more subjective liberty over the feats that we see on screen. Because on paper, even though Bonnie fights against Saturn, I think Killer probably has a better performance. He cuts down Hawkins even in a compromised state, and he also then, or not also, he did this before, but he's able to injure Kaido and fight against Big Mom on the roof. So much better feats on paper, but I think Jewelry Bonnie is one of those characters that come with so much hacks ability that we would have to put her over Killer. So that's the placement for me. 7th spot, Killer. 6th spot, Jewelry Bonnie. I'm very curious where you would place these two. They're very much in the mid-card of the worst generation. So where they're placed, I think would be super interesting to kind of discover. With how hacks Bonnie is, I could even see some people ranking her higher. But I just don't feel comfortable doing that until we can see a little bit more from her, which I'm not sure we're going to be able to get, because the story was wrapped up quite nicely. But hey, here's her making a return in the final arc, hopefully. In 5th spot, we have Captain Eustace Kidd. Now, this is an interesting character. When Oda first established him, he thought that he was going to be the most popular of the Supernova, not including Luffy and Zoro, obviously. But Law really stole the popularity and ran with the ball. And I think that Oda saw that popularity and kind of went along with it and made Law not just a cooler character, but also probably more powerful. And that's why I'm ranking Kid below Law. I think we can all say that in this sort of tier of strength, we have Kid, Law, and Zoro. It just matters to where I kind of have placed them. The whole argument comes down to whether or not we think that Kid had a better feats in Wano than Zoro. And given that I've placed Kid as number 5, you can maybe, we're just going to make up words now. You can probably guess that I think Zoro's feats were more impressive. But Kid has a letdown after this arc. If you know what you know what I'm talking about just by saying that. And we're going to get into it. But let's go over what he did do in the arc. He fought against Kaido and Big Mom. He was holding his own fairly well enough, just as good as Law was. He then, with Law's help, took down Big Mom. Now, Law kind of got maybe the more killing type of blows on Big Mom, but Kid was certainly indispensable in really damaging and, sending Big Mom crashing down into the volcano. He played a massive part in that and does need to get his flowers for that feat. Zoro, on the other hand, who we'll touch on now just when we get up to him, was able to take on Kaido's right-hand man, Killer, and beat him by himself. However, it took him, he had to get drugged up first, then took him down, and then got completely taken out for the rest of the fight. So, what's a greater feat? Zoro taking down the top strongest Yonko commander of Kaido's crew, or Kid teaming up with Law to beat Big Mom and Emperor herself? So it's very much kind of, apples and oranges, like I said, on what order it should be in. We've got to remember that Zoro also was able to damage Kaido, cut through his scale, showing the sheer attack power that Zoro is capable of at this time. And that he hasn't even mastered Conqueror's Haki yet, which is wild. The thing the thing that Kid has going for him is that after this confrontation, he goes up, arrogant as a peacock and takes on Shanks. And this does not end well for him at all. It ends so badly that he gets one-shotted. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Kid, who has just gone on to take down an emperor with the help of Law, gets one-shotted by another emperor. Now, does that go to show how weak Kid is? In a certain respect, but it goes more to showing just how much, how cocky and arrogant he is and how much that really affects him in a fight. His combat battle prowess is getting overwhelmed by his delusions and arrogance of being the best. And that's a mindset that a warrior really can't be going into when you're dealing with these top tier characters that we have in the Supernova. That is not an error that I think Zoro would make. And if we want to play this out in our heads, do you think that Shanks would take down Zoro in one blow the way he was able to do to Kid? I just don't think so. So I had to put Zoro higher up on my list than Shanks. And, we're talking about the Boy Wonder, so let's get into him now. In 4th place, just outside the bronze, we have Zoro. Now, if people are all upset that I was ranking Zoro above Kid, people might also be upset that I was ranking Zoro below Law. Now, these three, just like the top 4 that we had, are interchangeable to a lot of people. Lots of people would have Zoro as the strongest, and I understand why. Impressive feats against Kaido, was able to take down a Yonko commander all by himself. But for me personally, and I have to break my rules and talk about who's next, because it really, even though I can backtrack, I think comparing them at this stage, just because of how close they are, is needed. So I'm sorry for jumping ahead. But 3rd place is Trafalgar D. Waterlaw. Now, the reason why I placed him above Zoro, we kind of know what Zoro can do with how I was comparing him to Eustace Captain Kidd. The reason why I ranked Law above is because he was able to damage Kaido as well through his Gamma Knife. He was also able to deal more lethal damage to Big Mom herself and be 50% of the reason why the Emperor was defeated. He then went on to fight Blackbeard, not just one-on-one, but one against his entire crew. Now, it didn't go splendidly for him. It's not like he did massive amounts of damage, but he was able to hurt Blackbeard all by himself. So I definitely think he's stronger than Kid. And just with that extra feat with what he did against Blackbeard, I would like to give it to Law over Zoro. Now, if anyone's going to say, no, Jack, you're completely wrong. Zoro is stronger than Law. I could see it. I think by the end of the series, he is going to be stronger than Law. But at this current time, I'm going to backtrack and do the opposite of what I did before. I'm going to go feats over my own kind of personal headcanon of where I think Zoro is. Because we just see Law take on 3 emperors, damaging Kaido, which we know is such a great feat, damages him just like Zoro damages him, is able to be the driving factor of why Big Mom was defeated, and then take down, fight against not just one emperor, but the emperor and his crew. I just don't think Zoro has been able to accomplish such a, great feat. I reckon he might be capable of it, and I could definitely understand why some people might think he's stronger. But just for me, in their current versions of themselves in the story, I have to put Law above Zoro. Now we have 1 and 2, and we all know who it is. It's Luffy and Blackbeard. I haven't done a very good job in this video in sticking to one placement at a time, but just with these really close matchups, I just feel like talking about them both at the same time has a better flow rather than having to go back and repeat myself when we get to the person that's always higher than the character that we're initially discussing. But which order did I put Luffy and Blackbeard? People might think I'm crazy for this, And I'm going to follow more what we followed with Law and Zoro. And I'm actually going to put Luffy as stronger than Blackbeard. Now, that might not make much narrative sense because a lot of the time the bad guy has to be stronger than the good guy into the very, very tippity end of the series where the good guy then takes the lead. But unfortunately, we just don't know what Blackbeard's capable of. He fights against Law and he doesn't have a super easy time. He does get injured with it. He gets scared off by Rayleigh. Now, whether or not he could have beaten Rayleigh is very much debatable. He just didn't want to get in the scuffle at Amazon Lily with Rayleigh. But we can't rule out the fact that he was just scared of taking on Rayleigh. Now, I have to cut. I apologize for the cut, but I was getting into spoilers, which I don't want this to be limiting to people because it's very kind of minor spoilers. But Luffy is kind of fighting with people that would be at that Rayleigh tier of strength right now in the current story. He also has a lot more feats. He's fighting the 5 members of the Gorosei. He is taking down Kaido, not by himself because Kaido had been previously damaged, but he's going God mode and finishing Kaido off. We've never seen Blackbeard take down an emperor that was like, somewhat in decent condition. Whitebeard had already kind of carked it, and he did it with his whole crew. So I reckon that Luffy, just on paper I'm saying, just on paper has better feats than Blackbeard. So I feel more comfortable saying that Luffy is stronger than Blackbeard. If you're someone that's going to argue that no, Blackbeard's the main antagonist, he needs to be stronger than our protagonist at this stage, I'm going to throw back that we don't know that Blackbeard is the main antagonist. Oda could go down the route that Mu, the leader of the Gorosei, the leader of the world government, the king of all kings, the man that sits upon the empty throne, could be the main big bad of One Piece. We don't know. They could do a mixture of Mu and Blackbeard. But with some information that we were getting in Elbaf, the most recent arc of One Piece, revolving around Blackbeard and certain family members of his, I'd be more inclined to believe that Mu, or Emu, is actually the main bad guy, meaning Luffy at this stage could even narratively make sense to be stronger than Blackbeard. So that's the placement I'm going to go. 4th place, Zoro. 3rd place, Law. 2nd place, Blackbeard. And then 1st place, Luffy. My boy Luffy, our MC, the... God, I never thought I would have been saying this 4 years ago. A goddamn God himself is ranked number 1 in terms of the strongest members of the Supernova. Now, I need to say, guys, this isn't my most effective and efficient video. I am very, very tired. It is very, very late here. This will probably drop in the morning sometime just because I don't have enough time to even do minor editing to it. But these videos are all just off the cuff because I have been a little bit tired. I don't know if you can tell by my eyes, but I've cut a few times in this video, which I don't usually do. Usually it just gets done in one take and, non-scripted. So I'm talking over myself, bumbling around like an idiot. But in a time where videos are so produced and, there's AI everywhere, I feel like, what do I have to give in terms of content? And it's myself, that's it type of thing. I can't contend with people in production. So I'm going to just, go off my takes. Oh, I'm doomed. But no, it's been a pleasure talking about One Piece. We haven't done a One Piece video in quite a while. We've been doing lots of Naruto content lately and a lot of movies. So if you want to let me know down in the comments if you've watched any of my videos before, the state of the channel, if you're liking what you're seeing, please let me know just so I know, what my audience is wanting to watch. But if you have liked this video, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Going over the Supernova was a treat, and I think it was a great place to start in maybe ranking some other One Piece kind of groups or fights or arcs. Lots of different things we can rank in One Piece. We can even rank the islands, for God's sake. There are some really, really spectacular geography in One Piece. We could even do something as nebulous as that. But guys, I've been Jack Cypher. It has been a pleasure talking about One Piece today. We need to do it more. Have a lovely night.